Halloween, celebrated each year on October 31st, is a mix of ancient Celtic practices, Catholic and Roman religious rituals, and European folk traditions that blended together over time to create the holiday we know today. The Celts, who lived 2,000 years ago in the area that is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated their New Year on November 1st. This day marked the end of the summer and the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of uncertainty and fright. Food supplies often ran low, and for many people afraid of the dark, the short days of winter were full of constant worry. Celts believed that on the night before the New Year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to Earth. To commemorate the event, they built huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. During the celebration, the Celts wore costumes typically consisting of animal heads and skins. When the celebration was over, they relit their previously extinguished hearth fires from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the coming winter. By 43 AD, the Romans had conquered the majority of Celtic territory. In the course of 400 years, they ruled the Celtic lands. Two festivals of Roman origin were combined with the traditional celebration of Samhain. The first was Feralia, a day late in October when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead. The second was a day to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruitful abundance. To the Romans, apples were a symbol of love and fertility. One Samhain ritual was to cut an apple in half, mentally fill it with all of your illnesses and bad habits, then put it back together and bury it in the ground. As the apple rotted, so would all your misgivings. As European immigrants came to America, they brought their varied Halloween costumes with them. Because of the rigid Protestant belief system that were held in early New England, celebration of Halloween in colonial times was extremely limited here. It was much more common in Maryland and the southern colonies. As the beliefs and customs of different European ethnic groups, as well as the American Indians, meshed, a distinctly American version of Halloween began to emerge. The first celebrations included play parties, public events held to celebrate the harvest, where neighbors would share stories of the dead, tell each other's fortunes, dance, and sing. Colonial festivities also featured the telling of ghost stories and mischief-making of all kinds. In the second half of the 19th century, America was flooded with new immigrants. These new immigrants, especially the millions of Irish fleeing Ireland's potato famine of 1846, helped to popularize the celebration of Halloween nationally. Taking from Irish and English traditions, Americans began to dress up in costumes and go house to house, asking for food or money, a practice that eventually became today's trick-or-treat. In the late 1800s, there was a move in America to mold Halloween into a holiday more about community and neighborly get-togethers than about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. At the turn of the century, Halloween parties for both children and adults became the most common way to celebrate the day. Parties focused on games, food of the season, and festive costumes. Parents were encouraged by newspapers and community leaders to take anything frightening or grotesque out of Halloween celebrations. Because of their efforts, Halloween lost most of its superstitious and religious overtones by the beginning of the 20th century. By the 1920s and 1930s, Halloween had become a secular but community-centered holiday with parades and town-wide parties as the featured entertainment. Despite the best efforts of many schools and communities, vandalism began to plague Halloween celebrations in many communities during this time. The printing of Halloween postcards in the United States, used most often as party invitations, began in the mid-1800s, with most of the cards being printed in the late 1800s and the 1920s. Collectors estimate that approximately 3,500 images were produced for Halloween. The illustrations featured traditions characteristic of the time period, including bobbing for apples, playing games of fortune, while others illustrated witches, pumpkins, and cats. By the 1950s, town leaders had successfully limited vandalism, and Halloween had evolved into a holiday directed mainly at the young. Due to the high numbers of young children during the 50s baby boom, parties moved from town civic centers into the classroom or home, where they could be more easily accommodated. Between 1920 and 1950, the centuries-old practice of trick-or-treating was also revived. Trick-or-treating was a relatively inexpensive way for an entire community to share the Halloween celebration. In theory, families could also prevent tricks being played on them by providing the neighborhood children with small treats. A new American tradition was born, and it continued to grow. Today, Americans spend an estimated $6.9 billion annually on Halloween, making it the country's second largest commercial holiday. On Halloween 1950, Mary Emma Allison, the wife of a Presbyterian minister, saw a United Nations International Children Emergency Fund booth, better known as UNICEF, collecting funds to send powdered milk to undernourished children around the world. She thought of getting children to collect donations for UNICEF instead of candy. She began with her own children, and in her own community, they collected $17 and sent it to UNICEF. Thus began a tradition which continues to this day here in the United States and throughout the world. Hundreds of years ago on Halloween, when it was believed that ghosts came back to the early world, people thought that they would encounter ghosts if they left their homes. To avoid being recognized by these ghosts, people would wear masks when they left their homes after dark so that the ghosts would mistake them for fellow spirits. In recent times, Halloween costumes are traditionally modeled after supernatural figures such as monsters, ghosts, skeletons, witches, and devils. Over time, the costume selection extended to include popular characters from fiction, celebrities, and generic archetypes such as ninjas and princesses. Costuming became popular for Halloween parties in the U.S. in the early 20th century, often for adults as well as for children. The first mass-produced Halloween costumes appeared in stores in the 1930s when trick-or-treating was becoming popular in the United States. Today, Halloween is becoming once again an adult holiday or masquerade like Mardi Gras. Men and women in every disguise imaginable are taking to the streets of big American cities and parading past grinning carved candlelit jack-o'-lanterns. When the Irish immigrants arrived in America, they brought with them the tradition of carving out turnips, or sometimes a potato or rutabaga, and placing coals or a small candle inside the hollow. These were then displayed on doorsteps at Halloween to ward off evil spirits. However, the Irish quickly discovered the pumpkin, which had spread its vines across the entire North and South America. The pumpkin was readily available and easier to carve than a turnip, since turnips were not as plentiful or as easy to find as they had been in Ireland. This practice spread swiftly among the general population in America and was soon an integral tradition of the Halloween festivities. The legend of the jack-o'-lantern started with a man nicknamed Stingy Jack, who was a notorious drunk and practical joker. Jack was said to have tricked the devil into climbing into a tree. He then carved an image of a cross into the tree's trunk, trapping the devil in the highest branches of the tree. Jack made a deal with the devil that said if he would never tempt him again, he would promise to let him down. Legend says that after Jack died, he was denied entrance into heaven because of his evil ways. Jack was then denied entrance into hell because he had tricked the devil. Instead, the devil gave him a single ember to light his way through the cold, dark winter. Jack placed the light into a hollowed-out turnip to keep it lit longer, and he has been roaming the earth ever since. The Irish began to refer to this ghostly figure as Jack of the Lantern, and then simply Jack-o'-lantern. A yearly Jackolantern Festival is held close by in Keene, New Hampshire, on a Saturday in mid to late October, at which time residents and citizens in the area attempt to amass the largest number of lighted pumpkins in one place trying to meet or beat the world record, which they have held in various years. It's truly a sight to see. The use of witches and cats in the celebration of Halloween originates with the Druids, who believed that ghosts, spirits, fairies, witches, elves, and all manner of supernatural manifestation emerged on Halloween night to possibly harm the living. Christianity painted the image of a witch as an ugly old hag, often sporting a wart on her nose. Considered by the church as cohorts of the devil, witches were said to employ spells and charm in order to bring harm to good men and women. Aside from the association with cats, they were said to be assisted with bats or spiders or other creepy crawly creatures which carry out their wicked deeds. However, this evil witch character is pure fiction. Witches may be traced back to at least the Celts and possibly even further. In ancient times, men and women who were designated as witches were actually considered to be wise people initiated in the mysteries of the spiritual world and healers and experts in the art of medicine. It was a common Celtic belief that cats, particularly black ones, had once been human beings who had been transformed into felines as punishment for their evil deeds or through coming in contact with bad magic. Catholic traditions, blended with the Celtic beliefs, eventually turned the cat into a witch's companion, along with the theory that the witch herself had a mystical knowledge to transfer herself into the form of a cat. With the Roman invasion into Celtic lands came the Roman festival which honored Pomona, the Roman goddess who presided over fruits and gardens. She was invariably portrayed as a beautiful maiden whose arms were filled with fruit and who wore a crown of apples upon her head. It is generally accepted that it is from Pomona that the association of apples became aligned with Halloween, along with the custom of bobbing for this particular fruit and its close link to the autumn harvest. One of the fun customs at Halloween is going to see horror movies. One such movie is Frankenstein, based on a book written by Mary Shelley in 1818. Mary started writing the story when she was 18, and the novel was published when she was 21. Most horror movie buffs remember the classic 1931 film starring Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. Also in 1931, the vampire horror film Dracula, based on Irish author Bram Stoker's 1897 novel, hit the theaters starring Bela Lugosi in the title role as the vampire Count Dracula. Between 1879 and 1898, Stoker was a business manager for the world-famous Lyceum Theatre in London, where he supplemented his income by writing a large number of sensational novels, his most famous being the vampire tale of Dracula. For the more recent horror flicks, we consulted with Dennis Peck, BCTV Teen Talk producer and all-time horror movie buff, and he came up with a list of his all-time favorites. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Scream, Sleepaway Camp, The Shining, Carrie, The Evil Dead, Night of the Creeps, Slumber Party Massacre. Dennis tells us that each of these films were groundbreaking in their era. Most haunted attractions are seasonal places of entertainment designed to thrill and scare patrons. They include haunted houses, corn mazes, and hay rides, and the level of sophistication of effects has risen as the industry has grown. Haunted attractions in the United States bring an estimated 300 to 500 million each year and draw some 400,000 customers. Halloween brings us a variety of food, especially associated with the holiday. Because it comes in the wake of the annual apple harvest, candy apples, caramel or taffy apples are common Halloween treats made by rolling whole apples in a sticky sugar syrup, sometimes followed by rolling them in nuts or other small savories of confections and allowing them to cool. A candy pumpkin is a small pumpkin-shaped mellow cream confection primarily made from corn syrup, honey, and sugar. Sometimes called candy corn's first cousin, candy pumpkins were first produced in mid-20th century using a process similar to that of candy corn. Candy corn is a confection in the United States and Canada, popular primarily around Halloween. Created in the 1880s, the three colors of the candy mimic the appearance of corn kernel. Caramel corn is a confection made of popcorn coated with a caramel or molasses-based candy shell, creating a sweet, crunchy treat. The combination of caramel and corn dates back at least as far as the 1890s with the strong molasses flavor of Cracker Jacks. Halloween is one of the oldest and the second most popular holiday to Christmas in America. Millions celebrate the holiday each year without knowing its origin, which makes the holiday that much more exciting. Some view Halloween as a time for fun, friends, and family. Others still see its superstitious nature of ties to the deceased. Some religions even view it as an unholy holiday. But whatever your view, you cannot deny the fascinating nature of the story of Halloween. So now that you know the history of Halloween and how it is celebrated by millions of Americans, as the 31st of October approaches, enjoy your favorite Halloween custom and have a happy Halloween.